Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Verdant Revolution. This will be Part 6, the second half to Chapter 5. Izuku sighed as Hatsume once again ran her numbers, flailing as she did so. How is this possible? It isn't possible. There's no way your muscles and bones are this dense. That's not possible for a human being. Are you certain you don't have an enhancer quirk that you're not aware of? Hatsume frantically clawed at her hair, looking at the same results from the last 3 times she had run the numbers. Izuku shook his head. He had told her several times at this point he was quirkless, but she continued to doubt him. Though seeing numbers like the ones she was looking at, it didn't surprise him why. It had been an important step for them. If she had reacted negatively to him being quirkless, then he would have dropped her immediately. No, Hatsume, I've not got any quirk like I've said multiple times. And, as I was saying regarding the suit, we're just going to have to make my gear capable of underwater combat, especially since my muscle and bones will only get denser. The rebreather will be an important part of that. Hatsume spun to look at him at the forge from where she was at her desk. Midoriya, the average human muscle is about 1.06 kilograms per liter. Your muscle density is already triple that, and you're telling me it's only going to get denser? This has to be a quirk. There's no other way you could possibly be like this. Hatsume paced, as Izuku put the final touches on what would be the cast for the slide of a handgun. It had been easy enough to get her permission to make something. She was so excited to work with another person, he's pretty sure he could have proposed a nuclear warhead and she'd have said yes. Hatsume, if you want, you can have a sample of my blood to run for a quirk factor, of which you won't find even if you find a way to get the equipment to run the blood. Izuku set aside the cast of the slide with the other parts that he had completed, and stood up stretching. Regardless, it doesn't change what needs to be done, or just how badly it needs to be part of the design. I have no interest in drowning simply because I didn't take the precautions and ran into a damn waterbending quirk. Hatsume pouted at him. Obviously, I have no problem putting it in the design, but if we aren't careful, then the design's just going to get outdated when you suddenly sprout fins and gills. Also, don't go throwing ATLA references at me to sass me. Izuku smirked and grabbed his bag, currently empty of scrap, and the guitar that had been drying off its final stain layer. All that was left was to get the new strings. That's fair enough. You've not had the prior experience with this, I have. I'll see you again tomorrow, and we'll start working on the prototype for the gauntlet. Sound good? Izuku conceded the point, and Hatsume smiled. They had reworked the design on the wrist crossbow to be modular. The gauntlet would serve as a base for the modules to snap to on the fly, in case he needed to change out what was on his arm, or a module got trashed. In addition, Hatsume believed she had come up with a way to minimize the bulk of it until it was effectively mounting to an undersuit that would cover him like a wetsuit. If they could get the idea operating, it would allow them a lot of leeway in the actual gear. Besides that, if Izuku could find a way to replicate Atsum here on Earth, he shook that idea away. That would require facilities that he simply wouldn't have access to. Even if he could remember the exact makeup of the material, which he could, he didn't have any way to recreate it. Izuku quickly found himself on a train to the local commercial district. While it wasn't quite as large, diverse, or generally as populous as if he went into the city, the music store there was well liked by the area, and he figured he'd go somewhere close. He got off the train and worked his way through the streets until he had reached the storefronts. He found his destination right beside a small family-run market and deli. It was a quaint little neighborhood, and if Izuku had to resort to using the GPS on his phone, then no one would ever know. Upon entry into the store, Izuku could see that he was in the right place. Organized rows of instruments lined the walls and the show floor. He wandered over to the guitars with his stringless one to find a new set and realized very quickly that he was out of his depth. Steel, nickel, brass, bronze, nylon. Besides that, there were different string cores, winding types, and coatings. An employee evidently had seen his distress as she made her way over to him before tapping him on the shoulder. "May I help you, sir?" The girl was about his age, he noticed. Slender and fair-skinned, she was several inches shorter than him. Short purple hair sat cropped just above her shoulders, but the most prominent features were her 2 plug-like jacks, where earlobes were. Izuku chuckled nervously. "Is it that obvious I needed the help?" Izuku gave her a small, nervous smile. "I'm looking to get strings for this." Izuku handed the guitar to the girl as he explained. "My friend, who taught me to play, was also the one that dealt with these kinds of things, so I've absolutely no idea what I'm looking for here." Izuku gestured to the wall of string types and varieties. So in this case, I'd love your help. Izuku looked down at the tag on her shirt. Miss Jiro. Jiro snorted, still enraptured by the guitar. You don't need to call me miss. We're the same age by the look of things. Jiro ran her hands up the body of the guitar, admiring the rune-like carvings in the stained surface, as well as the carefully hand-carved icon of a black cat, sitting on a moon in the lower right of the guitar. This is amazing work. Who did you have do this for you? I know of all the guitar makers in the area, and I don't recognize this work. And what are these symbols? Is that ancient Greek? Izuku smiled down at the guitar. It was always nice to have your work recognized, especially if it was someone clearly so enthusiastic about instruments. I've been working on this carefully for the last couple of days. I'm glad you like it, and no, not ancient Greek. Something like that, though. Jiro's head whipped up. You did this in only a couple of days? The woodworking on this would imply weeks. That's amazing. What does it say? Izuku continued to smile, practically beaming at her praise. It's an old quote from the 19th century author Mino J. Savage. It holds a bit of personal meaning for me. Same with the icon of the cat. The brave die never, though they sleep in dust. Their courage nerves 1,000 living men. Izuku's smile had taken on a sad tinge, and Jiro looked at him slightly confused, but could see the meaning behind the words all the same. Well, Mr. Jiro held the guitar at its heel in her left hand and reached out with her right. Izuku looked up from the guitar where he'd been staring distantly at the engraved symbols, and shook her hand. Midoriya Izuku. Well, Midoriya, let's get you strung up, shall we? You have, in my opinion, 2 options for an acoustic guitar like this. Jiro turned to the wall and started pointing out strings to Izuku. I personally think the nylon strings would sound better when they're being picked, but steel strings sound better when they're strummed. She glanced over and took one of Izuku's hands in her own. You certainly have the calluses. The steel strings wouldn't be an issue. They tend to hurt people's fingers until they have calluses built up. The nylon strings contribute a warmer, mellower sound to the guitar and are well suited to genres like classical and folk. Meanwhile, the steel strings would be better suited for most other things. Izuku took the information in as she threw it at him, and he made his decision by the time she had finished. I'll go with the steel strings. A lot of what I've learned to play leans more towards what would be considered classical or folk, but I think it would be better to have the range. Jiro smiled at that and brought him to the counter. I'll get this strung up for you, and after that's done, we can get you checked out. It'll only take a bit to restring the guitar, but it could take an hour or 2 of playing to break in the strings and let them stay in tune. If you're interested, we could take it over to the Deli after I've restrung it. I'd love to hear you play some. If that is, your playing skills are half of your woodworking. Izuku quirked his eyebrow at that, still smiling, though a little embarrassed at the offer. Do all employees take such a personal interest in every instrument that comes through? Jiro blew out her cheeks, slightly pink at that, and looked away. Look, it's been a slow day, and you are by far the most interesting person to come in here lately. Don't let it go to your head. As for the few minutes until close after that, I'm sure my parents can handle it. It's our place, and like I said, it's been slow. Midoriya smiled and agreed. It would be good to get feedback from someone that apparently came from a musical family. He was certain he was likely rusty. It was practically no time before they found themselves sitting at a table out in front of the deli with drinks and small sandwiches. Him with a freshly strung guitar and her with one that she had pulled from the back of the shop. For a while, they didn't play. They just sat and talked while finishing off the snack they had picked up. They spoke of many things. What it was like to work in the shop, funny little anecdotes, his projects, some of her ideas for projects. Izuku had learned that her parents were musicians as well as owning the shop. He actually recognized their names when he heard them in full. They weren't world-class, but they were certainly popular within Japan. When they did play, the air was filled with a serenade of notes, a warm melody that eased the heart and made one think of the good days. Jiro was absolutely blown away by the young man that had come in the shop looking for strings for what appeared to be an exotic guitar. Then he began to sing, in what language she had no idea, but the message still came through all the same. It sounded like a story of love, loss, and redemption, one that made a heart cry out for better times before Izuku returned to those steady, warm days. So, is this what you want to do? Follow in their footsteps and become a musician? Izuku asked her, as he finished cleaning up his area. She tensed and frowned before sighing and looking down at her hands. I'll admit, I'm not sure anymore. Used to. I would have said yes to that without hesitation, but lately, I don't know anymore. I want to help people, but I'm not sure how to do it. Should I go to a hero school? Should I be a musician? Does that make sense?" Jiro looked up to find Izuku nodding. He knew very well what that feeling was like and stated as such. "I had that very struggle recently myself, so I know all too well. I decided to get a hero license to help people, but is that the only way? No, not at all. Is that the best way to help people? Maybe, maybe not. That's arguable, on multiple fronts and from multiple points for both ways. Police, firefighters, doctors, there are any number of careers that help people. Even musicians in their own way have a special ability to inspire that many other careers don't. If that's the case, what do I do? I hate this feeling of indecision. You seem so resolute in your decision." As corny as it sounds, Jiro, all I can really say is to follow your heart. I didn't simply look at the pros and cons and go, "Ah, yes, that appears to be the best way." Izuku shook his head. "No, quite the opposite. All the options seemed like good ones. I simply went with the one that I felt would suit me best. Maybe it might not be apparent for you right now, but I'm sure you'll get there. Here, let's do this." Izuku pulled a 10-yen coin out of his pocket and held it up for Jiro to see. "This isn't definite, but I find it helps sort out your feelings occasionally. If the coin lands on the musician's side, and you feel disappointed, then it certainly clears up your subconscious thoughts on the matter, yes?" Izuku flipped the coin into the air, but while Jiro's eyes were on the coin, Izuku's were looking through the window of the deli and straight at a robber, holding up the kind man who had served them their food. Before the coin even hit the table, Izuku was moving to intercept. By the time Izuku had stepped through the doors, the robber was already starting to get twitchy. The old man wasn't moving as fast as the robber would have liked, and the robber had a handgun pointed directly at the old man. Where the hell did he get that from? Japan may be more relaxed, but they are still stringent as hell regarding it. "Hey! What do you think you're doing?" Izuku called out to the robber, his hands already in the air when the man whipped around, face startled and eyes desperate. No signs of drug use. Pupils are steady if not a bit large from the adrenaline. Seems coherent. "Why are you doing this?" Izuku asked the man this calmly, as if it were the most obvious thing to be asked right then. "Why does it matter?" The man bites out the reply. "It doesn't matter at this point anyway." He jerked the gun back to the old man, yelling at him to hurry, before swinging it back towards Izuku, who had crept slightly closer. "Look, right now you're in trouble. I won't lie and tell you that you aren't. But right now you haven't done anything you can't come back from." Izuku looked across the man, catching any details he could use to talk him down. He didn't want to have to hurt someone if he didn't have to. A wedding band. So he's married. His eyes flicked across his clothing, where various hair was stuck to it. "Do you have a family? A pet?" Izuku calmly asked the man his questions. Gotta keep him talking. Keep his attention on me. The man grit his teeth as he looked at Izuku. "I have 2 daughters. My wife died a month ago. We have a calico that wanders in and out if you can consider that a pet." The gun was still trained on Izuku, but he had his attention now. "I'm sorry to hear that," Izuku frowned. "I've lost a good number of people, and I know how hard that is. It must be rough taking care of your daughters now on your own. How old are they?" The man licked his lips, gun drooping slightly as he thought about his children. "It is. It's so hard. They're 4 and 6. How do you explain to your daughters at that age why you can't eat dinner every night or why they never get to see you because you're always working?" The man was getting agitated again, and starting to twitch. "It's hard to tell someone that young something like that. You can't expect them to understand. Their happiness is your responsibility, and you can see that slipping away from you far too quickly. But think about them right now. Like I said, right now you're in trouble, but you haven't passed the point of no return. If you want them to be happy, you can't go through with this. What would they think of what you're doing right now? What would you tell them about this? Everyone needs help sometimes. That's nothing to be ashamed of. Just hand me the gun. We can still both walk away from this, yes? You can go back home to your daughters." The man seemed to struggle for a moment before breaking. "All right," he choked out. "I don't want this to be how my daughters remember me." The man was so close to handing over the gun when the door slammed open and Death Arms came running in. The man snapped the gun back up and a frantic look in his eyes before strafing his gun across both Death Arms and Jiro now standing in the doorway. What happened next ran in slow motion for Izuku. Death Arms slammed his fist into the robber's stomach, The robber fired when his body clenched from the impact, and the gun was pointed straight at Jiro. Izuku was already moving, and had just enough time to dive and grab Jiro before the bullet skimmed through his right tricep. No sooner had the robber hit the floor, out cold, than Izuku was up and yelling at Death Arms. "You goddamn idiot! I was seconds away from defusing the situation before you broke through the front door!" Izuku jerked his left arm at the glass double doors that were now shattered. "Besides that, rather than disarm the man, you chose to punch him. The body clenches when it's hit, you asshole. You damn near got an innocent civilian killed because of your inability to deal with the situation properly." Death Arm simply stared Izuku down as he yelled at him before grunting back. "Look, I know you're probably upset about getting shot, boy, but don't yell at the man that just saved your life. The villain needed to be taken down, and that's what I did. A couple of doors aren't anything compared to a bullet through your chest or your head when the villain decided to stop toying with you." Izuku simply stared at the man in horror before turning on his heel, shaking his head and moving on to Jiro. "Are you all right?" He helped her to her feet, before hissing when she poked his right arm. "Am I all right? Are you all right? You've been shot!" Jiro was frantically gesturing to Izuku's bleeding arm. "I'm fine. It just grazed me." Izuku muttered right after that it wasn't the first time he'd been shot. He didn't realize that Jiro could hear him at that volume and didn't catch it on her face as he began tearing his shirt apart to triage the flesh wound. They would have to stay to speak with the police as soon as they arrived, and oh boy did Izuku want a word with them regarding their hero. Izuku glanced over and picked up his 10-yen coin. "Hey, look at that." Izuku smirked up at his companion. "Looks like it landed on Hero." Little did he know that Jiro had already made her decision. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 5 of Verdant Revolution. Chapter 6 will be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying this one. I'm eager to hear your thoughts and reactions to this. Personally, I really like when Death Arms is made out to be a horrible person. So I'm super on board for that. Let me know your thoughts and reactions, though, to Jiro's introduction into this fic. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.